Have you ever wondered about the time and place you were born? Have you tried comparing it to other times in history? What would you use to compare one era to another? In this video, I want to share what I think is the worst time and place to be alive in history. England has always been a land of significant influence. Over centuries, it has been a beacon of progress and innovation, playing a pivotal role in shaping human history. The British Empire's expansion and England's current global standing are testaments to its enduring legacy. However, this story of resilience and growth almost had a different ending. It all started in the 1330s in China. During this time, many people began developing a mysterious and deadly disease. Over the next several years, this disease, now known as the bubonic plague, spread across Asia. Trade routes between China and other countries facilitated the movement of people and goods, unknowingly carrying the plague with them. By the early 1340s, the plague had reached the shores of Europe. The disease traveled through trade routes, carried by fleas that infested black rats. These rats were common on merchant ships, which facilitated the spread of the plague across continents. Few had known that these ships, vital for trade and commerce, were also transporting a deadly enemy. In 1347, the plague reached Italy, spreading rapidly through the major ports. By 1348, it had made its way to England, arriving in the port town of Melcombe Regis. From there, it spread like wildfire, reaching London and other major cities within months. The rapid spread was facilitated by the movement of people and goods, as well as the densely populated urban areas. The plague's impact on England was immediate and devastating. The symptoms were gruesome: fever, chills, vomiting, and painful swellings called buboes. Death often followed within days. Entire villages were wiped out, and urban areas became ghost towns. The sight of mass graves and the constant tolling of church bells became a grim reality. By the end of 1350, the Black Death had claimed the lives of between one-third and one-half of England's population. The social and economic fabric of the country was torn apart. With so many dead, there were not enough workers to tend the fields or maintain trade, leading to food shortages and economic decline. Immediate effects on the population. When the Black Death struck England in 1348, the effects were immediate and catastrophic. The disease spread rapidly through towns and villages, causing widespread panic and despair. Symptoms appeared suddenly, with victims experiencing fever, chills, vomiting, and painful swellings called buboes. Death often followed within days, leaving little time for families to react or seek help. The population was decimated at an alarming rate. Entire communities were wiped out, and bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. Mass graves became a common sight as local churches struggled to keep up with the death toll. The constant tolling of church bells signaled the relentless march of the plague, creating an atmosphere of dread and hopelessness. In cities like London, the situation was particularly dire. The crowded and unsanitary living conditions facilitated the rapid spread of the disease. Streets were filled with the sick and dying, and the usual hustle and bustle of urban life ground to a halt. The fear of infection led many to abandon their homes and flee to the countryside, though the plague often followed them there. The mortality rate was staggering. It is estimated that between one-third and one-half of England's population perished within a few short years. This massive loss of life had a profound impact on every aspect of society. Families were torn apart, with children orphaned and many left to fend for themselves. The social fabric of communities unraveled as neighbors and friends succumbed to the disease. Economically, the Black Death wreaked havoc. With so many people dead, the workforce was severely depleted. Fields went untilled, and harvests rotted. Artisans and merchants closed their shops, leading to shortages of goods and a sharp decline in trade. The economy ground to a near halt, exacerbating the suffering of the survivors. The psychological impact was equally severe. The omnipresence of death and the apparent randomness of the disease shattered the sense of security and order. People turned to religion for answers, but the church's inability to stop the plague led to a crisis of faith for many. Superstition and fear of the unknown grew, leading to the persecution of minority groups who were scapegoated for the disaster. Social and economic consequences. The Black Death's devastating toll on England's population had profound social and economic consequences. With the loss of up to half of the population, the traditional structures of society and the economy were severely disrupted. One of the most immediate impacts was on the labor force. The massive death toll created a severe shortage of workers. Fields lay fallow, and harvests were left uncollected. With so few people available to work, the surviving laborers found themselves in high demand. This scarcity of workers led to a dramatic shift in the balance of power between the landowners and the peasantry. Peasants could now demand higher wages and better working conditions, which was a significant change from the pre-plague feudal system where they had little bargaining power. The economic ramifications were vast. The labor shortage caused wages to rise, leading leading to inflation. Many landowners, unable to afford the higher wages, converted arable land to pasture, which required fewer workers. This shift contributed to changes in agricultural practices and the economy as a whole. Additionally, the decline in population reduced the demand for goods and services, leading to a decrease in trade and commerce. Many businesses collapsed, and towns that had once been bustling centers of activity were left desolate. The social fabric of England was also irrevocably altered. The rigid class structure that had defined medieval society began to break down. With fewer people, the survivors found new opportunities and social mobility increased. This shift laid the groundwork for the eventual end of the feudal system and the rise of a more modern, market-based economy. The church, which had been a central pillar of medieval life, also faced significant challenges. The high mortality rate among the clergy, coupled with the church's inability to protect people from the plague, led to a decline in its authority and influence. Many people began to question the church and its teachings, leading to a rise in religious dissent and the seeds of the Reformation. The psychological impact of the Black Death was equally profound. The sheer scale of death and suffering led to a sense of existential dread and a preoccupation with mortality that permeated all aspects of life. This was reflected in the art and literature of the time, which often depicted grim, macabre themes. Communities that once thrived were now ghost towns, and the constant fear of death altered daily life. Superstition and fear grew, and many minority groups, such as Jews, were unjustly blamed and persecuted as scapegoats for the plague. How the Black Death disappeared. The Black Death, which wreaked havoc across England, began to recede by the early 1350s. Several factors contributed to its decline. First, as the disease ran its course, those who survived either developed some immunity or managed to avoid infection. Quarantine measures, although primitive, were implemented in many areas. Towns and cities started to isolate the sick, and ships suspected of carrying the plague were kept in quarantine. Improvements in public health and sanitation, though minimal by modern standards, also played a role. People began to understand the importance of cleanliness and the need to avoid areas heavily affected by the disease. The natural die-off of the infected flea and rat populations, along with the arrival of colder weather, helped slow the spread. Over time, the combination of these factors allowed the plague to diminish and eventually disappear from England. Conclusion and long-term impacts. The Black Death left a lasting impact on England, transforming its social, economic, and cultural landscape. The massive population loss led to a labor shortage, shifting power from landowners to peasants and contributing to the decline of the feudal system. Workers demanded better wages and conditions, leading to improved living standards for many. Economically, the reduced population lowered demand for goods and caused landowners to convert fields to pastures, boosting the wool industry. Social mobility increased as the rigid class system began to break down. The church's failure to protect people from the plague led to rising religious dissent, planting seeds for the Reformation. Culturally, the pervasive presence of death influenced art and literature, creating a macabre and introspective focus. Despite the devastation, the survivors' resilience and adaptability laid the groundwork for modern England, showing the nation's strength and capacity for change in the face of catastrophe.